Okay, so I wanted to make this video basically to make the argument that I believe the Democratic Party or rather the Green Party is a much better force for change than the Democratic Party, purely because their platform is just better. And I think if you truly care about the future of this democracy and where this country is going, then you understand that the two-party system is really a joke. The two-party system is not helping anybody. And what's actually happening is the Republican Party has gone so far to the right that they've basically become a fascist party under Donald Trump. And the Democratic Party, following them to the right, is basically a center-right political party. It is not a party that values progressive policies. And what the Democratic Party and the DNC did to Bernie Sanders this election cycle proves that. And it also proves how difficult, if not impossible, I'm not going to say impossible based on what I'm going to show you guys in a second, about 9% of the population voting for Hillary and Trump. But it's definitely going to be a very hard thing to do to try to take a corrupt political party like the Democratic Party and try to sort of morph it into something progressive. It's going to be very hard to do that. And I think going forward, I think people need to have more of an open mind about their political decisions. You know, and I think a lot of people, we have to have sort of a what have you done for me lately mentality when it comes to the Democratic Party, especially black folks. Because we're in a situation where we're, giving 90+% of our vote to this political party that's really producing lackluster results at best. And honestly, if you look at the local and state level, and you look at a lot of these Democrats that are in power in Baltimore and in Chicago and Milwaukee, you see in some cases, and I'm not saying this is true across the board, but definitely in some cases, Democrats can be worse than Republicans when it comes to assaulting the black community. And it's time for us to get honest about that. We kind of have this thing where we vote Democrat from tradition and based off of tradition because of the bills that were passed in the 1960s that were needed and definitely beneficial, more definitely needed to be done. And I think that's being made clear now that more needed to be done back then. And incrementalism has completely failed when it comes to aiding communities, disadvantaged communities that have suffered from oppression for many generations. But because of that tradition, because of that history, I think people have this false sense of loyalty to a party that really just doesn't do enough for our community. So we need to look at our options. So what I'm about to do is I'm about to show you guys, I'm about to compare the platforms of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And I'm about to show you guys, just based on what these parties advocate for, that the Green Party is 10 times better than the Democrat. That's a Freudian slip. I was about to say the Republican Party because that's basically what the Democratic Party is today. It's basically the 80s Republican Party. Okay, but I'm about to show you guys exactly why the Green Party is better, because purely because of what they advocate for. So let's start now. So here we are on the Green Party website. This isn't Jill Stein's website, but this is just the website for the Green Party of America, basically. And we're going to go down here to about the middle of the page, and you have here the 4 pillars of the Green Party, sort of like the four binding principles of the Green Party. So you have peace, you have ecology, you have social justice, and you have democracy. So let's just read this, let's just go into a little bit more detail here about what the Green Party is standing for and why it's so much better than what we have from this two-party system. So they give you a little bit of the origins of their 4 pillars right here at the top, but look at these 10 key values here. Okay, so grassroots democracy. Okay, social justice and social justice and equal opportunity. Ecological wisdom, non-violence, decentralization. Okay, community-based economics. For a lot of black people who talk about starting black businesses and starting, trying to build a new Black Wall Street and things like that. You have a political party here that directly addresses some of those wishes, concerns, and desires. Okay, so you have feminism and gender equity. You have respect for diversity, personal and global responsibility, and a future focus and sustainability. Now, this isn't, like I said, I'm about to show you Jill Stein's platform in particular, but these are just 10 key values that the Green Party stands for. So if anybody ever asks you, well, what does the Green Party stand for? What do they advocate for? You can really throw any of these things at them. Decentralization, this is something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, but it's basically the idea that, the way things work now, everything for the most part is centralized. So you have these central authority entities, you have these central forces that sort of control everything from the top, and you have to just accept what they decide that they're going to do. So for instance, a lot of these alphabet agencies are centralized forms of law enforcement. The Federal Reserve is a centralized form of wealth and power concentration. So when you talk about decentralization, you're talking about taking away the power literally from the establishment and putting more power in the hands of the people. If you just think about how many government positions there are in this country that people don't even vote for. We have a representative democracy, and you vote for these representatives thinking that they're going to represent you, but really most of the time they really don't. So that's a failure of this centralized system that we have, and we need to become a little bit more decentralized and take away the power from the establishment. Okay, so I'm not gonna go into each and every one of these. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna now go to the Democratic Party website. Okay, this is the Democratic Party website, and you can immediately see here on the first page, there's not a whole lot in terms of policy. And I've already clicked on all 4 of these things up here at the top. None of these things directly lead to policy. If you want to get to the policy of the Democratic Party, the policies that they call for, you have to scroll down here to the bottom where they have issues in like the tiny letters here, a tiny font. This is like 8 or 9 point font right here. And you see they have civil rights, education, energy independence, environment, healthcare, jobs, national security, yada, 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 voting rights. Typical things that you hear from the Democratic Party. And even if you click on each one of these things here, there's just not a whole lot of detail. A lot of it is just talking about what Obama has tried to do and things like that. It's very different from the Green Party website, where you're getting issues on the first page and big, colorful, with big colorful pictures and very eye-catching font and things like that. The Democrats hide their issues because they really don't have a lot of substance here when it comes to these individual issues. And actually, when I go to Jill Stein's website, jill2016.com, okay, you have and you go to her issues here. You just click on the platform, and this is basically the Green Party platform via Jill Stein, and this goes into a lot more detail than the actual Green Party website. So we're just going to compare a few things here because there's a lot here. One of the first things that jumped out to me was this emphasis on poverty. And this is something that I really admire the Green Party for. And it's something that the Democratic Party, quite frankly, is horrible at. They're horrible at addressing the issue of poverty. And this is something that Cornel West and Tavis Smiley have called them out for repeatedly for several years now. You go to their website here, the Democratic Party website, there's nothing here about poverty. Nothing. So the Green Party via Jill Stein puts an emphasis on poverty, establishing the right to a living wage job, guaranteeing economic human rights, including access to food, water, housing, utilities, with effective anti-poverty programs to ensure every American has a life of dignity, free universal child care. This is not stuff the Democratic Party is calling for. And people need to be aware of that. Because you have a lot of people who are projecting their own personal opinions about the Democratic Party onto the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party isn't even advocating for that stuff. So let's now go down here to healthcare. So the Democrats do have something of a focus on healthcare, but as I was talking about earlier, most of this here, if you read it, most of it is just talking about the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. They're not going into nearly the level of detail that the Green Party goes into. So let me just read a few of these things here. Right at the top, establish and improve Medicare for all single-payer public health program. Boom. It says it right there. That's the first thing that's the first bullet point. The Democrats ran away from single payer. They avoided the single payer plan, even when they had the ability to pass it, when they had, the votes in Congress. Eliminate the cancer of health insurance. So the Green Party wants to completely eliminate health insurance, which adds costs while reducing access to health care, because they want to make it a right. Okay, so you don't need health insurance if health care is a right. Ending overcharging for prescription drugs by using bulk purchasing negotiations. Allow full access to contraceptive and reproductive care. There's just prioritize preventative health care, including physical activity, healthy nutrition, and pollution prevention. This kind of goes into climate change a little bit here. So they're even acknowledging that climate change is detrimental to healthcare, So the details here are just better than what the Democratic Party is offering. So they talk about education here. Again, the Democrats talk about education. The Democrats have a platform on education, but once again, it's a lot of talking around the issue. It's a lot of, this is what Obama has done, and we kind of are striving for the same thing with maybe slight changes around the edges. The Green Party is like, no, this is what we want. Guarantee tuition-free world-class public education from preschool through university level, courses. Abolish student debt to free a generation of Americans from debt servitude. Protect our public school systems from privatization. Ensure racially inclusive, sensitive, and relevant curriculums. Where have you ever heard the Democrats advocate for this? Ensuring racially inclusive, sensitive, and relevant curriculums. We have people in Texas now, led by a bunch of Republicans, who are trying to whitewash the education system in America. They want to whitewash slavery. They want to whitewash Jim Crow apartheid. They want to whitewash all of this stuff that isn't really, that doesn't make America look too good. So they have restored arts, music, and recreation to school curriculums. Once again, you see an emphasis on poverty. Recognize poverty as the key obstacle to learning, that is true. That is obviously true. Okay, poverty is hugely impactful on the ability for people to learn. It's hard for you to learn something, if your school looks like the dumps, I'm just keeping it real. If your school looks like the dumps, your school texts are bad and outdated. Your textbooks have mold in them. And then on top of that, you live in a poverty-stricken environment, so there's a lot more violence, there's a lot more theft, there's a lot more illegal activity. That's not a good learning environment. So how can you seriously care about education and not address the issue of poverty? You can't. You're talking around the issue, Democrats. And increase federal funding of public schools to equalize public school funding. A lot of schools in the inner city, for instance, are just underfunded. That's why they can't afford to have better equipment and better resources. So you have these underfunded schools in poverty-stricken areas where there's a lot more violence, a lot more everything bad. So let's just continue here down, and let's now talk about criminal justice reforms. What's important to mention and to emphasize here is that the Democratic Party does not have anything in their platform, in their issue of, on their platform, I guess I should say, addressing criminal justice reform. It just doesn't exist. And I clicked on civil rights, and even their civil rights section doesn't address criminal justice reform. Now, I know that they've given lip service to criminal justice reform, but until they make reforming our criminal injustice system a priority enough to put it on their platform, I'm not going to take it seriously. I'm just going to consider it what it really is, and that's a lot of talk. It's a lot of hot air because they know people are protesting about these things that a lot of them low-key support and have directly aided and abetted and making worse. So they have to give lip service to criminal justice reform just to make it seem like they're doing something. Well, the Green Party actually has it in their platform, so let that be known. In the failed war on drugs. Boom. Straight, just blatantly, no Democrat I'm not hearing anybody saying this. Anybody. I'm not hearing any Democrat openly, flat out saying in the war on drugs. Okay, replace drug prohibition with harm reduction. Legalize hemp. Legalize marijuana and hemp. I mean, really, folks, are we really supporting change and progress, or are we just kind of going along to get along with the Democratic Party? End police brutality, mass incarceration, and institutional racism within our criminal justice system. I mean, everything here is incredible. Demilitarize the police. Okay. Establish police review boards so that communities control their police and not the other way around. I wrote a blog entry about this. None of this stuff is anything the Democrats or any of these people within the black misleadership class within the Democratic Party is actually calling for any of this stuff. None of it. I'm not hearing anybody call for this stuff. So I mean, that's, I can keep going on and on. But if you want to read it in a little bit more detail, just go to joe2016.com and just see for yourself. Just see for yourself. And this is why they don't want these third parties on the debate stage. This is why they don't like giving these third parties a lot of airtime, because they're afraid that people are actually going to look at their platform and vote for them. And they don't want people putting third parties into power. So there are a lot of people now who will tell you that, voting green is a waste of time because they can't win. That is a common thing that I've heard from a ton of people. You hear from a lot of Democrats, you hear from a lot of progressives. I like the Green Party, I like what they stand for, I like some of the things that they're calling for, but they're not going to win. So I'm just going to keep voting for the lesser of two evils, and which is still voting for evil. Here's the problem with that. I'm about to show you guys something from the New York Times. Okay, and people need to understand that there are a lot more votes out there than the media, and even the media would have you believe, but even a lot of people would have you believe. Especially people who are wedded to this system. Okay, they want you to believe that you have some, 50, 60, 70% of the population in this country voting for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. That's not true. Matter of fact, it's about 9%. And the New York Times showed us that, and I'm about to show you that now. So only 9% of America chose Trump and Clinton as their nominees. Okay, this came out August the 1st. So it's a couple weeks old, a little over a couple weeks old now. So it basically states the United States is home to 324 million people. Each square here represents 1 million people. Okay, scroll down. So you have 103 million people in this country who are ineligible to vote. They're either felons who, can legally have their rights taken away from them. It's called felony disenfranchisement, which is a whole different issue in and of itself. Then you have children, which make up the vast majority of this group. And then you have non-citizens. A lot of these people are just people, a lot of these people may be immigrants who don't have, voting rights, whatever the case may be. So we scroll down to just keep that 103 in mind. We scroll down here and you see this huge chunk of people, 88 million eligible adults. These are people who can vote, who do not vote at all, even in the general election. Okay, 88 million people. That is nearly a third of the total population of this country. Okay. You scroll down here to the bottom further, we have an additional 73 million who don't vote in primaries, but they do vote, or they most likely will vote, in the general election. So if you combine these two here, okay, if you combine the number of people who don't vote at all with the people who don't vote in the primaries, you have 161 million people alone in this country who do not vote for who is actually on the ticket. Okay, the only way you vote for somebody, the only way you decide who's going to be on the ticket is if you vote for in the primary. You have 161 million people in this country who just opt out of that. They just say, you know what, I'm going to let some of the worst elements in this country decide who is going to be on the ballot in November. I mean, this is a complete and total breakdown of democracy. To have this many people in this country, especially when you subtract out the 103 million people who don't vote or who can't vote. Okay, you subtract out those 103 million people from the 324 million Americans in this country. Okay, you have a huge swath of those people, of the remaining people, who just are not making that decision to go to the primaries and decide who our next leaders are going to be. Some of them are voting in the general election. Almost half of them are voting in the general election. Okay, but we need more than that. We need more people voting in the primaries. There's a ton of votes here. Between these two sections alone, there are a ton of votes left on the table that nobody's even claiming. So we scroll down here further. It says the remaining 60 million people voted in the primaries, about 30 million each for Republicans and 30 million for Democrats. Which basically means within this group up here, between the people who don't vote in the primaries or don't vote at all, You have enough votes right here in these two sections alone, okay, to overcome the entire number of people who vote Democrat and Republican in the primaries. And this includes Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders supporters. Okay, but it doesn't end there. Let's go down, let's break this down even further. But half of those primary voters, half of the 30 million people who chose Trump and the people who chose Hillary Clinton, just 14% of eligible adults, total 14% of eligible adults who are eligible to vote, 9% of the whole nation voted for either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. So basically, once you go within that 30 million on each side, and you break down the number of people who voted just for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, so you have, these are just Bernie Sanders supporters. These are people who voted for somebody other than Trump in the Republican primary. Okay, that's how small of a number of people we're talking about here versus the entire U.S. population. There are plenty of votes on the table. So right then and there, anybody who tells you that the Green Party can't win most likely are not looking at the fact that most of the people in this country really aren't even voting. People are assuming that just because Hillary Clinton got the Democratic nomination, then that means that the majority of people, in this country support. Look at her support numbers. Look at her approval rating. That's what I wanted to say. Look at the number of people who support and approve of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I mean, there's a reason why. I mean, how can I frame this? You have proof right here. Okay, you have proof right here from this interactive chart. You have proof right here that you can get the nomination for a major political party, okay, and still be hated by the majority of the people in this country. Which means that getting the nomination has no bearing whatsoever on the number of people who support you. That means absolutely nothing. It just means that of the 30 million people who vote Democrat, you just got a majority of those people. That's all that means. Okay, and it's aggravating to me because this means that there are a ton of people who either don't vote at all or who chose not to vote in the primaries, who could have put Bernie Sanders over the edge. They could have put him over the top. This is a turnout issue. Point blank, period. It's about getting people out to vote. It's about registering people to vote. It's about winning the debate of ideas. The Green Party's ideas are just better. But clearly the vast majority of Americans who support a lot of those things don't realize it.